Hi, Scones here. I'm going to talk about today the control wheel of abuse, which is relevant for any sort of relationship that you have in your life, and it's used by counsellors to work out if someone is in an abusive relationship. So in the centre is the word control, and there are 7 spokes coming off the outside. So in order they are threats and intimidation, abusive dependency, ridicule of values, emotional abuse, isolation, misuse of privilege, and financial exploitation. And I believe the people of New Zealand are in an abusive relationship with their government. And if it was any other sort of relationship, people would be telling you to get the hell out of it. So the first spoke on the wheel is threats and intimidation. Police are finding and arresting people for visiting their family and friends, for taking their children to a playground to play, for not wearing a mask and not sharing their personal information via contact tracing, for going to the beach or for a drive in their car. They're making criminals out of everyday citizens. The government is threatening to cancel Christmas, keep everyone in lockdown. They're warning people to follow the rules and restrictions or face consequences. All of this if they don't think contact tracing, testing or vaccination levels are as high as they want. And that seems to change on a daily basis. The army is keeping people with cold and flu symptoms or no symptoms locked up in managed isolation and quarantine facilities. It's utter madness. The government are threatening businesses if they don't follow or reinforce rules, social distancing, contact tracing, mask wearing, so the businesses turn people away who have mask exemptions through fear of a fine or closure. This creates a breach of basic human rights by using food at supermarkets as blackmail. The food is held to ransom until you obey. No mask, no food. No signing in, no food. I'm sure soon it will be no vaccination, no food. Using the threat of dying or causing the death of someone else to control by fear. That's never healthy in any sort of relationship. The next spoke on the wheel is abuse of dependency. The government is preventing partners from being at their own child's birth. They are not allowed to support their partner. Families are prevented from seeing their ill and dying loved ones in hospital. There's all these visitor restrictions. Tens of thousands of people have had medical appointments postponed, delayed or cancelled for diagnosis of serious illnesses like cancer. People are unable to get home to New Zealand if they have been living overseas. They haven't seen their loved ones for up to 2 years. They are unable to see loved ones in person. At level 4, people are finding it almost impossible to get medical care in person or dental care or prescription glasses. The government has prevented families from being able to have viewings and funerals of their deceased loved ones in the way that they wish. They're controlling the gathering size, etc. The next spoke on the control wheel of abuse is ridicule of values. So the government are denying people the access to religious services or leaders in person in level 3 or 4. The media ridicules and humiliates, and the government talks about consequences for people in society who catch COVID and spread COVID by going to churches or other religious and cultural practices they enjoy when in level 1 or 2. In my opinion, people are entitled to have their freedom of religion. The media name and shame churches and religious leaders. People are ridiculed by the media and so-called celebrities and government officials and are censored on the internet for having different values and opinions on COVID-19, masks, testing, contact tracing and vaccines. Media name and shame rule breakers, making an example of people who protest and speak out with different views, either in person or online. They hope to punish individuals to deter others who may feel the same or are considering acting out. The next spoke on the wheel is emotional abuse, which is everything I have written in the other sections. It is all psychological tactics and abuse, so you do as you are told. Anyone who thinks different to the narrative is painted as crazy. Government and media are pumping out article after article about conspiracy theories, fact-checking, anti-vax extremism. They're scaremongering, guilt-tripping and making fear of an unseen enemy keep everyone controlled. Encouraging family and friends to tell on each other for not following rules, which creates division and a breakdown in relationships and society. It's a them versus us mentality. They're guilt-tripping people that others will become sick and die if you don't follow the rules. You could be responsible for babies, children, and elderly dying, is what they say all the time. They're portraying people who don't believe or follow rules as selfish and just utter scum. They're manipulating families, creating division and fractures in family and friend relationships, believer versus non-believer. They're lying to, or at the very least misleading everyone about the extent of or the very existence of an illness, which in this case is COVID-19. They're excluding and denying access to sick, dying, or deceased loved ones, and they're forcing people to keep secrets from each other to avoid conflict. The next spoke on the wheel is isolation. They're literally controlling what you can do, who you can see, where you can go. They limit your time with your friends and family. You're told to keep 2 meters apart, no touching, forced to wear a mask, stay at home, contact trace, get tested, get vaccinated. They're putting people in managed isolation quarantine, literally telling people over 65 specifically to stay at home now unless they are vaccinated, like they're in some sort of horrific danger. If they step out their front door, they'll just fall over and die. The next spoke on the wheel is misuse of privilege. So the government makes all the major decisions without anyone else's input. They tell everyone else to follow the rules, but they don't follow them themselves. A lot of people in the media are the same. They're the ones preaching all the time about following the rules, and then they're caught out not following them themselves. The government's granted itself powers no government has ever had before, and they're sneakily passing laws through quickly at night, bills and legislation that we only find out about when we wake up the next day. It's really terrifying. And the final spoke on the wheel is financial exploitation. They have passed a law mandating the border and essential workers like nurses, etc., have to be vaccinated and have regular tests, or they can't work anymore in their roles. They're keeping businesses unable to work or unable to work to their full capacity, destroying livelihoods and closing the entire country down so people can't work, tradies, etc. at level 3 and 4. They're crashing the economy on purpose and then lying about it and saying the economy is doing great. We know that's definitely not true. We're in a lot of debt in New Zealand. House prices are rising, food prices are rising, power prices are rising, fuel prices are rising, and rent prices are rising. They're trying to say no test, no vax, no job, which is a breach of basic human rights. And they're starting to try and say they're going to mandate that all teachers have to be vaccinated. And there is a massive protest in the wings about that. There's a petition going and stuff as well. So I just like to point out that every single spoke on the control wheel of abuse is being used by our government against us here in New Zealand. And if it was a friend in an abusive relationship, you would advise them to leave or do something about it. And, you know, the question is, I've tried to tell you today that we are in an abusive relationship with our government. And the question is now, what are we going to do about it?